Going back to the refereeing, was there any point where you were kind of talking to the ref? Because it looked like there might have been a couple of cage grabs.
I told her, bro, this motherfucker grabbed my glove like 4 times, and I was like, hey, he's grabbing my gloves. And he told him, hey, stop. But, I mean, whatever, don't take a point.
All right, so Herb Dean had 2 referee appearances this past weekend at UFC Sacramento, and in both cases, you can hear this man being audibly booed by a decent portion of the crowd as he was being introduced.
And your referee in charge of the action, Herb Dean.
Let it go. Let that marinate a little bit.
It's not like everybody in the arena was booing him or anything like that, but there was definitely a substantial amount of fans that weren't happy to see him reffing, and to that I say good. Herb Dean is not a good referee. He hasn't been a good referee for like a decade now, and at least back in the day, he was able to hide behind the shields of genuinely garbage refs such as Steve Mazzagatti, Mario Yamasaki, and Kim Winslow. But in the current landscape of the sport, MMA referees are generally much better than what we had to work with previously, even though that's not saying all that much. But in contrast to that, I feel like Dean hasn't improved with the times, and I'd also argue that he's just gotten worse as a ref. Now, I think it's important to mention that ever since the UFC White House card, I think it's become a bit of a recent trend to shit on the guy, but I would just like to simply point out that I have been pointing out how frustratingly bad Dean has been for years now, even when the UFC was trying to convince us that he was the gold standard of referees. And not only is he a unique case where even active fighters openly trash him, but his inability to take accountability for his mistakes speaks to how unwilling he is to improve at his job. And yeah, in this video, I'm going to be talking about all this and more.
He's a tough son of a bitch, man. I hit him with everything in the kitchen sink, hit him with some hard elbows. Fucker was cheating and grabbing inside of my gloves, and I told Herb that. I fight clean, man, so it is what it is. Maybe I should be more dirty.
Okay, I want to extend an olive branch to Herb and those who, for whatever reason, blindly support him, because I like to consider myself a pretty objective thinking guy, and I try to see the nuance in things. Situations like this here with Fluffy Hernandez just seems more like heavy coat mixed with capitalizing on the fact that UFC fans have soured on Dean as a ref lately. Like, I'm not saying that there weren't fouls that he missed during Saturday's main event, but I feel like anyone who watched the fight might be able to agree that these alleged glove grabs from RoboCop didn't sway the outcome of the fight all that much. Like, Fluffy, even if he did grab your gloves, what does that have to do with you not knowing how to check a leg kick to save your life? And you know what, on a similar note, I'm not even sure if I totally side with Alex Pereira on his campaign against Herb Dean. I do believe that at least a few of the ending shots that Ciryl Gane landed against Pereira were to the back of the head. How many exactly, I'm not sure because it's hard to tell, but some of them look pretty illegal to me. But at the same time, again, a foul is a foul, and much like if a fighter got kicked in the balls or poked in the eye during a sequence where they were on the verge of getting finished, then they deserve a separation and time to recover. So in that sense, I guess I do agree that Alex probably should have been granted a timeout, but I am very skeptical on if he would have been able to claw his way back into the fight. And yes, heavyweight MMA, yada yada, anything could happen, yada yada, but realistically, I just think that on that night, even if Herb Dean rightfully called for a break, it would have just been delaying the inevitable. And much like in the case of Fluffy Hernandez from this past weekend, a large part of me looks at this smear campaign that Alex has been running against Dean as a way to cope over being completely dismantled in a high-profile fight. Remember, I'm saying all of this as an Alex Pereira fan, as well as a certified, self-admitted Herb Dean hater. I'm saying all of this because before I start trashing this man for the remainder of this video, I need you guys to know that I am more than willing to give him the benefit of the doubt when it's warranted. That being said, this guy Herb Dean has a very long history of either making completely idiotic calls and or completely ignoring blatant fouls throughout his career, and that is my issue with him. He is so incomprehensibly inconsistent at doing his job, where we've seen him make bizarre early stoppages, disgustingly late stoppages, and will watch fighters blatantly cheat from like 2 feet away and not do anything about it. For example, just 2 weeks after Pereira versus Gane, Dean allowed 3 separate instances of Shara Magomedov grabbing Michel Pereira's hair in order to stop him from posturing up from within his guard. You guys might remember that I'm one of the guys who thinks that eye poke should be an automatic point deduction, but even then, I will be the first one to admit that there are such things as accidental eye pokes. But I have never heard of a man accidentally grab onto the hair of another man once, let alone 3 times. First of all, if you are a professional fighter and you grab your opponent's hair, then you are a next level pussy, but how the fuck are you a professional MMA ref and let something like this slide with just a warning? Look, man, if there are no punishments, then there are no rules. This obviously applies to MMA as a whole and not just Herb Dean, but Herb is really the worst offending ref when it comes to letting bullshit like this go unpunished. Honestly, if the refs continue to not enforce the rules and make the tough calls, then why even have refs at all? These commissions are paying these guys week in and week out to occasionally stop fights, when in reality, the scope of being a good ref encompasses many more duties that the refs themselves outright ignore. Moreover, I love how after the Pereira versus Gane fight, Herb was so quick to make a video explaining the subtleties of what the rules constitute as back of the head, and then used it to absolve himself of any wrongdoing when it comes to his officiating. But after the Shara Shara Bullet versus Michelle Pereira fight, he didn't even bother making a video because he probably knows that there's quite literally no defense to him not removing a point from Shara. And by the way, I would have fucking loved to have seen that response video. Well, you see, the rules state that hair pulling is only seen as a minor offense, blah, blah, blah. Nah, man, you're fucking bad at your job. Regardless, after 2 highly controversial reffing performances over a span of 3 weeks, public sentiment towards Herb was at an all-time low, and according to Big John McCarthy himself, the commission actually grew some balls and took some action against Herb Dean.
Even the athletic commissions, Herb was, part of UFC 329, but you saw that he didn't have a whole lot of fights and he didn't have any of the bigger fights. They actually brought Mike Beltran in. Mike wasn't scheduled to do that fight, and he ended up doing the Connor fight.
Fuck yes, commission. If a referee continually displays qualities that make you question their ability to referee high-profile fights, then they shouldn't be allowed to officiate the most high-profile fight of the year. And sure, the Connor fight ended in the most anticlimactic fashion in UFC history, but that doesn't change the fact that Herb Dean is a liability to both fighters and to an extent the fan viewing experience. Look, everybody makes mistakes on the job. I will not pretend like I'm perfect at my day job or even as a content creator, but when you have the job of being a professional UFC referee, there's a lot more on the line than someone who sits at their desk all day like I do. And frankly, Dean's rap sheet of just straight up dangerous negligence is just too long to ignore. Just off the top of my head, he nearly let CB Dalloway die when he fought Khalid Murtazaliev. He let Chris Weidman get beat within an inch of his life against Luke Rockhold, where Javier Mendez later criticized Herb for letting the fight go on for that long. He let Cowboy Cerrone get brutally KO'd twice by Jorge Masvidal. And then in the very same event, he let Rafael Pessoa and Jai Herbert take so much unnecessary punishment that the commentary team had to yell at him, which as we all know by now was the beginning of the end for Dan Hardy, even though Paul Felder also called out Herb for his terrible reffing. Like, Dana, we really sacrificed Dan Hardy to protect this bozo? Mind you, those are just some of the terribly late stoppages that he's allowed to happen. That's not even mentioning all of the bizarre half stoppages where he moves like he stops the fight only to tell the fighters to keep going. And then when Conor fought Khabib, he let Conor pull out every foul in the book and barely did anything about it, and then made a ridiculous response video when people called him out for it. Does this sound familiar?
How much they pay? What do you think?
I don't know. How much you get paid, Herb? How much?
Okay, well, I was trying to do a good job for you. Okay. In my opinion. I hope. That's what I'm doing.
Were you well compensated, though?
No, that's the thing. I'm never well compensated.
All right.
I forgive him.
Okay, you forgive him? Do you forgive him? You're forgiven. He's forgiven. Okay.
Shit, man, even fighters don't like this guy. Just listen to what Jorge Masvidal has to say about him.
When Joe Rogan refers to Herb Dean as the gold standard,
I don't know what he's basing that off. Because if I would sit down and have a theological debate discussion with anybody that thinks he's the gold standard. Okay, I'll bring up numerous incidents where I see inconsistencies, I see nervousness, and I see something that I really dislike in a referee is if they stop it too early, but also they stop it like way too fucking late. Like Herb Dean is known for stopping fights crazy late sometimes, or crazy early, and I don't like those things.
I am very glad that I have documented proof of me saying exactly this for years now. There is no way to predict how this guy is going to oversee a fight on any given day. The chaotic nature of a fight is already hard enough to accurately plan for under regular circumstances, but God forbid you throw in the additional RNG of having Herb Dean of all people as your ref, then you might as well throw your game plan out the window. Seriously, if you're in a UFC fight and this guy's your ref, then you better make sure you never get hit clean once or he'll stop the fight immediately. But at the same time, you also have to be prepared to basically kill your opponent to secure the win, but you better make sure to not commit any fouls because he might take a point away from you for accidentally kicking your opponent in the balls once, but God forbid he'll give your opponent 5 warnings for oil checking you. The fucking absurdity of Joe Rogan calling this dude the gold standard when the quality of his work is far from gold and he also has absolutely no standards to how he refs.
But it gets to a certain point where you can't protect someone anymore. And I'm not calling for Herb Dean to get fired, but there should be a review. He should get demoted to lower levels of competition. These are big stakes events and careers that we're talking about. And there's got to be some better people that are working their way up that haven't gotten a shot yet, or some people that are a bit more knowledgeable.
Aljo brings up a good point. We've been spinning the wheels with this batch of refs for several years now, and in the case of Herb Dean, a couple of decades. Does the quality of Dean's recent officiating really seem like a guy who's been at this for as long as he's been at it? Does he really oversee fights like a guy who's been in the MMA trenches for the past 30 years? Because it really doesn't seem that way to me. We have former fighters like Chris Lieben and Frank Trigg that understand what it's like to actually compete under the brightest lights, who I feel like we should at least give them a shot at reffing a high-profile UFC fight, but instead they just slot in Dean, who fucks up majorly like half the times he steps into the cage.
For Herb, his issue is he doesn't want to insert himself into the fight and be, I think, one of the reasons a fighter loses, stuff like that. But when you're in that octagon, you're the sheriff, man. You gotta make sure things are going according to code. You have to. That's why you're in there. And he just doesn't take responsibility. When he issued the statement, or when he showed the video after the Potan fight, I'm like, well, this ain't good. And then you have the fight after that with our boy Feely, which is pretty evident. Now there's a common theme. It's not happened to all referees. It's happened to Herb Dean.
You know that someone is absolute cheeks at their job when they have me aggressively nodding up and down to Brendan Schaub criticizing them. He is afraid to make a bad call in the cage, but the other side of his inaction is that we've seen his fear of him fucking up lead to guys getting beaten way worse than they should, and it's led to obvious fouls not being punished. I agree that reffing in the UFC is a hard job, but there are capable refs out there that are able to handle the pressure of the situation, not necessarily perfectly every time, but at the very least much better than Dean is in the present day. There was a time when Herb was a solid enough ref. I mean, I do think his stoppage of Frank Mir versus Tim Sylvia is a little overrated, because I do feel like most refs overseeing that fight would have probably done the same exact thing that he did, but even still, there was a good chunk of time when he was consistently fine at his job, but frankly, those days are far in the past. His focus in the cage is not there anymore, he's too timid to step in at the right times, and his inability to accept any form of criticism makes it so that he doesn't allow himself to improve anymore at this point in his career. I would say that Herb would probably be better off taking a step back from reffing, and maybe he can train the next generation of referees, but good lord, I'm not even sure if that's a good idea anymore. Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know your thoughts on Herb Dean. Are the critics just too hard on the guy, or is it time for him to hang up the latex gloves? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Do you feel watching when Herb Dean's officiating that maybe he's lost a step a little bit?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. But that's not up to me. That's up to the commission.